Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and today is the end of my second day here in Cyprus. I didn't do a video for the first day because, well, I'll explain why in the video. So, what's happened so far? I got on a plane yesterday at 7 o'clock in the morning, Manchester, and that's basically the reason why I didn't make a video yesterday, because to get on the plane at 7, that meant you had to be at the airport. They advised 3 hours before, so it would have been like 4 o'clock, which meant either staying in Manchester or going on the last train from Stoke the night before, which is what I chose to do, because the thing is, I thought, well, even if I stayed at a friend's house and didn't pay for a night's hotel, then I'm still going to have to wake up at like 3 o'clock, so I'm not really having a night's sleep. So why pay the money or put a friend out? So I just went up from Stoke. I took the 11:30 train and got into the airport about 1 o'clock, and then stayed in the airport. And it was a good thing that I went early, because it was absolute chaos in Manchester Airport. They seem to have a massive staff shortage at the moment, and yeah, it did take a good two hours plus to get through customs. So got there and got on the plane at 7. Worth talking about that though, because normally with airports and planes, you don't actually ever meet anyone. They seem to be really badly designed for striking up acquaintances, unlike boats or trains, for example. But I actually met 3 people on the journey to Cyprus, which is pretty much unprecedented. So the first one was a young lady of Greek extraction who I met on Stoke Station. I helped to get a suitcase onto the train, and then I got talking to her again at Manchester Piccadilly because she was going to the airport. And she was going back to Greece to her family. I think she was born in Britain. Certainly her accent was purely British, but she was going back to her family home for the Orthodox Easter, which of course a week later than the Western Easter. I should say that I left on Easter Monday, so well, I actually left in the evening of Easter Sunday, because I wanted to enjoy Easter in Britain, because I love going to the Triduum services, the Maundy Thursday, the Good Friday, and the Easter Saturday services, and they were marvellous as always. And so I wanted to do that. We had a great day, an Easter Sunday with the family. We had a picnic in Dillon Park after church, which was really nice. But yeah, so I met this young lady. She was going back to the family home for Easter. And then in the airport, I went to pass the time into the restaurant, and I sat across, or a gentleman came to sit across from me. His name is John, an Englishman, but he lives in Boston. He's married an American. And we got chatting. He actually bought me a cup of tea, and we had a really, really good chat. He was telling me all about his life in Boston, about some of his visa problems he's had, which of course is something that I can relate to with America, because they didn't give me a visa. His was because he'd been arrested once for an altercation with a taxi driver many years ago, and that caused a problem with the American visa. And I said, well, how do you get around it? He said, well, you marry an American. I don't think I'm going to do that to get around my American visa problem. But he did wonder why the Americans hadn't given me a visa, or why I even needed a visa for America in the first place. And because I said, well, because I have a stamp for North Korea on my passport. And then he was like, why on earth would you even go there? But yeah, he was good company. And then on the plane, I sat next to a guy called Craig from Rosendale near Burnley. And he was a bird watcher, and he normally likes to go into the Shetland Isles and places like this, but he was going to Cyprus because apparently it's on a major migratory route of birds from Africa coming north in the spring, and that's what he was going to spend a week or two doing, is watching birds. So it was really interesting. I got to the airport, met my friend Alex, who did come earlier, and he's been in North Cyprus for a few days before I got there. And then with a little bit of a hassle, we got our rental car. We had to take like a kind of minibus, provided by the rental company to the rental car place, which is like a good couple of miles from the airport. And then I drove up to Pedoulas, which is the village within the Trodos Mountains where we're staying. And it was quite a nice drive by the sea at first, then inland. And when we were in the foothills, we stopped at a place called Omodos. And Omodos, we had a meal there, and it was a really, really nice meal, actually. I really enjoyed it. And because after Lent, I've only been able to eat meat for a couple of days, so it was really good to be able to eat meat again. But the salad was amazing. I do like Greek food very much. And yes, excellent meal. And then we went to this monastery in the center of Omodos, and it was a really marvelous place. It really was. The whole village was quite pretty. It was creamy stone, and there was a service going on at the time, so that was nice. And we actually sat and listened to some of the service within the monastery church, and then had a look in the museum afterwards. And the museum had some quite incredible icons. And part of the museum was in a room called St. Helena's room, because St. Helena, who was, I think, the mother of St. Constantine, they're often put together, St. Helena and Constantine, she went to Jerusalem and found the true cross. So she's very, very revered in the Eastern Orthodox communion. And she stayed in that room for 3 days. And I believe there was a piece of the true cross at the monastery. And so, yeah, that was really nice to go there. And then afterwards, we went through the village of Omodos, and there was an ancient winery, wine press that we saw, and then a hideout of, now I don't know how you pronounce it, but EOKA, Weka, I don't know, fighters. And they were Cypriot nationalists who fought against the British. The British owned Cyprus at the time in the 1950s. And in the museum of the monastery, there'd actually been a section dedicated to some of these fighters. And they were, there was a section on each individual one. But this place was where they caught a load of them, 6 of them, hidden in a room underneath a peasant's house. And that was a really interesting little museum. And what I liked is they included the British newspaper report on it. And of course, what wasn't talked about in the Greek exhibition was the British said, they got very useful information from local people who'd informed on these, what the British call terrorists. And of course, you don't hear much about that from the Cypriot side. But afterwards, we went to a little chapel in the village, but it was quite modern. It wasn't that interesting. It was pleasantly situated. And then we drove on, and the drive was quite spectacular up into the mountains until we got to Pedoulas. It was getting late when we got there. Then I'll be honest, I was really glad to get there, because I'd had like a couple of hours bad sleep on the plane, and that was it. And I had a banging headache, and I was literally falling asleep at the wheel. So we got there about 6, and I went straight to bed, which is why I didn't make a video, and I slept until 7 in the morning. So yes, just over 12 hours sleep.
Είδετε ότι εγώ είμαι Θεός, ο πριν γενέσθω το παν, και προτού στείνε την γην και των ουρανών, γινώσκον τα πάντα, ως όρος εν πατρί, και όρον φέρον εν ημίν. Δόξα σοι ο Θεός ημών, δόξα σοι, λόγος συνέστησαν των ουρανών γραμματική, συνείμιγναρ το πατρί και διαλόγου φέροντο.
Hotel is called Christie's Palace. It's really nice. It's got a really nice dining room and a great kind of balcony area with a cracking view over the village of Pedoulas. Pedoulas reminds me a lot of Bichari, which was a place in the mountains in Lebanon, where I also went with Alex, who I'm traveling with today. And in fact, the hotel reminds me of the hotel we stayed there. And you know what? There are similarities, because these are the hardcore Cypriots in these mountains. These are the freedom fighter ones, and of course in the mountains of Lebanon is the hardcore Maronite Christians who fought the wars against the Muslims and whoever else happened to be wanting to invade them at the time. So yeah, a lot of similarity there. But the reason we come to the Trodos Mountains is because it's famous for its painted churches, and these are small ancient churches with painted frescoes all over them. And today we went to 3 of them. So the first one was dedicated to the Virgin, I think, and it was in Moutoulla, which is the next village down. It's like a couple of clicks from here. And a very tiny church. I mean, from the outside, it looks a bit like a shed, to be honest. They're nothing to look at architecturally outside. But inside, they've got these glorious frescoes. And I think the Moutoulla one is one of the oldest. I'm thinking dating from around the 12th century. Very damaged, but nonetheless amazing. These images of biblical scenes and saints and Our Lady and Christ and stuff are incredible. And then we went on further to the next village, Panagia, and it was the monastery of Agios Ioannis Lampadistis, who was apparently a local boy. I think I asked the kind of caretaker who this saint was, and I couldn't really understand. I'm guessing he was a hermit, but he was local anyway. And this church was different because it was much larger. It was a monastery church. It has, I think it was 3 or 4 separate chapels. I think it was 4. And the frescoes were much better preserved here. I mean, they were really remarkable. Glorious church, because although grander than the first one, it was still quite humble and quite earthy in feel. But 3 of the chapels are in the traditional kind of Orthodox style, so very 2-dimensional. But the 4th one, which is called the Latin Chapel, was actually in a style of frescoes that are more like you would find in Italy. I think they were the vogue at the time, and there was a very nice 3D one of the 3 wise men returning to Jerusalem. But a glorious place, absolutely gorgeous. I would love to go to mass in, to be honest, either of those 2 churches, and the compound adjacent to it was really nice too. Then we went on to Kikos, so that was another drive. Now, Kikos is the most famous monastery. It's the richest monastery in all of Cyprus. Before we went to Kikos itself, we took the advice of our hotelier, and we went up to the top of the mountain to a place called Trodos, because there's a throne of the Virgin Mary there. And that was a bit of a surreal place. It almost reminded me of the DPLK a bit, because it was this brand new church on the top of the mountain, and everything was immaculate, like gold leaf. Everything was swept clean and on a big monumental scale, and it reminded me of a huge socialist monument. But there were glorious views all around, and then inside it just sparkled with gold. This was the majesty of God, which was nice, and it was nice to see everything perfect and new as a contrast to what we'd seen before. But I prefer the simpler stuff. I always think that Christianity works best when it's humble. Next to Thronos, the church, is the grave of the Archbishop Makarios. I think I've said that right. And he was the first president of Cyprus as an independent country, the Archbishop as well. He's very much venerated here. And from what I've read, he was a bit of a kind of a moderate against some of the more rabid nationalists who are very much in favour in this region. So that was that. Then we went down to the monastery itself. We had lunch in a restaurant and into the monastery. The museum was incredible. I mean, the museum, some of the treasures in that museum, unfortunately I couldn't photograph any of them, but there were some incredibly intricate carved wood crosses, with scenes from the Bible in there, and some very powerful icons. My favourite, though, was one of the crosses. It was a carved wood one, but covered in metal, and it was called the Black Cross because it says that during the Ottoman period, it was stolen from the monastery and then, quite unexpectedly, returned by a dark-skinned lady of another religion. So I'm guessing she's a Muslim African. But why she decided to return it, we don't know. Who she is, we don't know. But it's called the Black Cross or the Black Lady Cross because she returned it to the monastery. The church itself is holy because it has an icon painted by Saint Luke of, reputedly painted by Saint Luke of the Virgin with Child, which I did venerate. But the church itself wasn't really me. It was too much. It was, it's a bit over the top, a lot of gold, not my thing. And after the beautiful painted stuff we'd seen earlier, it just didn't do it. Then we returned to Pedoulas, which is the village where we're staying, and we went to the painted church within the village. And that was like the first one, looked like a shed from the outside, but inside it was glorious frescoes, much better preserved than the first one, although Alex preferred the style of the others. I don't know. I can see where it's coming from. These were more rustic, perhaps, but I like them, and they we could tell the biblical stories they were telling, and it was all dedicated to the Archbishop Michael, and not the Archangel Michael, and there was a glorious fresco of him, which I really liked. So that was that, and came back to the hotel, and that's where I am now. So tomorrow there's more painted churches, and we head onwards to Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus. That's it from me. Keep travelling.